Hello, welcome to the section entitled Initializing Data Systems with Products. And this is about cloud data flow. So essentially, data flow itself is a platform to allow you to run basically data processing jobs in a serverless environment, meaning Google will provide all the compute and you only pay basically per second that your data job is running. So that's why it's cost effective. Now, under the hood, Dataflow uses an open source project called Apache Beam, which is basically the API you're going to use to interact with Dataflow. And it's probably the easiest way of seeing this is through a visual diagram. And what you basically have on the left, when you write your code, you can write them essentially as batch processing or stream processing. The difference is batch processing, essentially, you sort of have a fixed set of data that has an end, basically. It runs, the job runs, processes that data, and you're done. Stream processing, on the other hand, essentially is data that's basically unbounded, it's ending, and it just keeps on coming in. And your code will now take chunks of that data, process it through, and then puts it somewhere, right? So that's the difference between batch and stream processing. This whole blue API layer is actually sort of the code that you're writing. And so pipeline is one of the concepts in Apache Beam. And you write your code, that code probably runs on say your laptop, runs somewhere. And that then interacts with the backend, which is the run times. So there are a number of open source solutions like Apache Flink, Apache Spark, that you can run yourself, right? Or another model, and we'll do this first, is we're going to actually use the runtime that runs on our own machine. So the code, the Beam code will basically run on our machine, and it'll basically interact with the runtime environment on our machine and process the data locally. Another model, which is more relevant to this section, is we're going to run the code locally. It's an interact with an API with Google Cloud Dataflow, run the job all basically in Google Cloud, and you can inspect the results there. So again, Dataflow itself is just a backend runtime for running Apache Beam, basically data models. Okay. Again, as we said earlier, you're basically paying for it, the runtime environment on a per second basis, and only on essentially the other resources that you're using, but basically you're paying for a compute. The pricing essentially is a little bit higher than you would pay here. So like, for example, for batch, you're paying about 7 cents per CPU hour. DPUs are basically CPUs with some data and memory associated with it, but you're basically paying for about 7 cents per hour, right? And the equivalent, if you were running at your own, GCP or GCE instance, would be about 2 cents to 3 cents per hour. So you're paying between about 3 times as much as you would if you were running on your own. The difference being is, in this case, you're only paying it for while it's running, though. If you're running, obviously, with GCE, you're paying for instances as long as they're running. So that's where the savings can come in. We're going to do 2 quick starts. One, there's different languages you can use. The Apache Beam supports, right? The common ones, I think, ones that I remember seeing, there's Java, there's a Go one, there's a Python one. That may be all I can remember. I figured the Python one was the easiest one of the 3 that I looked at to get up and running. So we're going to use it. Now, one thing to keep in mind, there's different ways of setting up Python on your machine. And if you just want to follow their tutorial, you can do it that way. I use a tool called PyEnvironment, which allows me to create different environments on my machine, like basically run different versions of Python. And then there's a plugin called PyEnvironment Virtual Environment, which basically allows me to create sort of Python virtual environments for a particular project, so all the dependencies don't get mixed with other dependencies. So it's basically a way of isolating dependencies with Python. So I'm going to use Pi environment and Pi virtual environment in my example. Okay, so let's click on the quick start. And first thing I need to do is, instead of doing this Python business that they're talking about here, I'm going to do it my way. So let's see. Yeah, so we'll get down to this point, but I'm going to do it using my tooling. So Pi environment versions. The first thing you need to be aware of is that there's only certain versions of Python they support. I think it doesn't support 3.10, but it supports 3.8. So I'm going to do Pi environment, virtual environment, 3.8.12. So that's the version of Python I'm going to use. I'm going to call this Dataflow. And so I should now have a Dataflow virtual environment, Pi environment virtual, activate, Dataflow. I think that's what it is. Pi environment, activate, Dataflow. Pi environment versions. Okay, so I'm on my Dataflow version now. Okay, so now I'm on Dataflow. So the next, and I have another screen I'm gonna look at for the notes. So I'm gonna cheat behind the scenes. The first thing you need to do is you need to get Apache Beam. So in this case, I'll switch back and forth. Basically, you need to download it. So actually, I can just do it on the screen, I guess. Okay, install Apache Beam. This takes a second, so let this play out. I'll pause the video if it takes too long. I don't think it takes that long. I'm done. So we'll come back later and we'll install the GCP add-on, right? So to execute a pipeline, we're going to use the direct model right now. So we basically need to have an input file and then an output file, and then we just run this command. So let's look at the code real quick. So let me just show you this kind of before we run the code. Let's look at the code for a minute. It's under examples. Why can't I find it? Say Python. Oh, it is examples. The one that we're going to, this word count's the one that they're doing here. Now, the intent here is not really to understand, how to write Apache Beam exactly, but you kind of need to kind of generally know what it's doing, right? So basically, this is just a bunch of imports. You're importing stuff from Apache Beam. If you scroll down the bottom here, you can see the entry point is you basically call run, which then runs this chunk of code here. And this is just basically parsing arguments. So there's some arguments you can pass, and we'll use those arguments, right? And then basically you're setting up your pipeline, which is kind of defining where's the data coming from, what it's doing during it, and where it's going to. And basically with the Beam, you're basically going to just put this. This has got some unusual Python syntax. Apparently they overload some operators that make it it took me a while to figure out what is all this syntax. So either way, it's some specialized syntax that this Beam library introduces. So the way you read this is it basically reads the data from a file. It splits it. I think it splits it into a bunch of files. It splits that data into individual words. It does some sort of count operation, and then it groups them basically. So that basically it's grouping all of the same words together and then summing them all, and then it's writing them all back out. So the end result is if you feed it in some text, file, it'll basically count all the words and tell you how many words of that type were in the file. So I think that's basically the code. So again, this code is going to run on my machine, and then it's actually interacting with the runtime or runner on the back end to then actually execute it. Now, in this first example, both operations will be happening on my machine. Later, we'll run the second part, which is the runner, on Google Cloud Platform's data flow. Okay, so let's get out of this. Okay, I just messed up my window here. Here we go. Okay. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is have an input file. I think I just can go to my machine. I'm going to pause for a second. Hang on, give me a second here. Pause my video. Okay, I'm back. Okay, so what do we need to do? I need to create an input file. So this is users J Tucker. So, okay, so touch input.txt and via input.txt, the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. Apparently this phrase has every letter in the US alphabet in it, which is interesting. Okay, so I have input, oops. And now I think all I gotta do is run the command. So let's see if I can get back here. So I need to pat the input. Okay, actually, I know I do. I'm gonna cheat. I have another screen because I can't flip back and forth. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna leave it up on my other screen so then I can type here. So I'm gonna do Python module Apache bean examples word count input. I think I can use relative files. I hope so. Put text output counts. See if it works. So again, that's running my code locally, and then it's going to spin up the local runner. The runner will then process the data based on the parameters, and then it'll spit out the output. So let's see, I may have to pause the video. Sometimes these take a few seconds, especially the first time I run it. It seems like it takes longer than I would expect. I'm going to pause the video until this is done. Okay, I'm back. I think it took a few seconds to like start up. If I ran it again, it'd be faster, but it should have said it completed. So let's see what it did. Yeah, so there's, right, so there's the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. There was exactly one word of each type, which is what we expected. And that's an example of that running locally. Okay, so the next step is figuring out how to run this same thing. Instead of running locally, we got to run it in the cloud. So I'm going to pause the video and kind of set this all up, and then I'll walk through what it was required to set this up, because I don't actually remember off the top of my head. So. Okay, I'm back. Well, I'm going to take this in pieces because I doubt I'll get it on the first pass. But I think the first step is you need to kind of make sure your data, your Google Cloud project is all set up right. And so what that amounts to is first you need to have a GC, you have to have a project, which we already have, right? So here's my project, right? Next thing you need to do is enable billing, which I've already done. You have to enable cloud data flow, right? So I think the easiest way of doing that is just type in data flow. I already activated already and did an example, but if you go through this, it'll start the wizard. You have to activate it. I think the wizard will talk about creating a service account. We're going to try to do it without the service account, because I think I have already credentials. I already have my own personal credentials for Google, and I'm going to try to use that to run it locally, which will basically drive the API. We'll see how that works. If that doesn't work, I'll go back to using a service account. So you can see I did a successful example previously. Okay. Yeah, I think you need a bucket somewhere, right? You need to basically have a place to store your file and where to dump the output to. So we need to go back here. Okay, give me a second. I'm going to pause the video a second again now. Okay, so enabled data flow. So we need to basically authenticate, right? And since we're running Lings locally, I have to authenticate locally. So I believe we need to, I have already installed the gcloud command locally, right? So I need to go gcloud init. See if I can get this right. I'd like to log in, yes. Of course, I have the wrong window open. Oh well, let's see if I can. Lord, no, I don't remember my other account. Jesus. So I need to remember my other account, which is another screen. Let me pause again. I'm gonna try to figure out plan B. Hang on. So let's see. Pause the video. Okay, I'm back. Let's try this again. Obviously, I'm bouncing around a lot here, but oh well. gcloud init. Yes. Okay, so now I'm logged in with my training account and allow. Okay, so now just use this project. No. Okay. Now, next thing we need to do is, because we're doing things through the programming, like through code, right? I have to log in also as the application default. So see if I can get that right. So gcloud, I think it's auth. Let's see, I want to do application default login, I believe is the command. Right. So this is the same separate login, but this is basically allow the Python libraries to talk with the API. So I believe that's now done. Okay, so now we have to get back to our materials, which of course now I don't have. So now I need to pause the video. Okay, I'm back. I got distracted. So the next thing we need to do is, now that I got myself locally logged in, right? I have to have a bucket to store the output of the job, right? Because it's not going to write back to my machine. So, and then I need to have a copy of the original data somewhere in the cloud, like in a bucket. So we're going to basically put everything into a bucket. So I think I can go into here and go to cloud store, cloud storage, right? And I need to create a bucket. Get rid of this garbage. Create a bucket. And I'm going to call this, I don't know, J Tucker data flow. J Tucker data flow. Continue. Leave it to default. Create. So I've got a bucket that's currently empty. I need to upload a file. So let's see. I need this file, the sample text file. I don't remember where I had it on the machine. I think it's in my personal folder. I think I can get to here. Here. Desktops here. Input text. Okay. Yep. Open. Okay. So I got my data. Okay. I got my input file here. Now I got to basically, I think all I need to do is run it now. Just got to get all my parameters right on this command. Okay. So let's see. Well, let's just do it in pieces. This is the command here. I have another window because I can't type and read this at the same time. So let's see if I get this here right. Okay, make this wider. So the first step is I need to run Python M, okay, Apache, Beam, examples, word count. Then I have to provide an input, and then GS. Okay, so the bucket's name was J Tucker data flow. So J Tucker data flow, and then input dot text. Okay, output. Okay, output. I want to put it into GS J Tucker data flow counts. Runner. Oh, I forgot to install. Okay, give me a second. I forgot a step here. Okay, so I already forgot a step. If you remember right, in order to get this to run, I actually had to install this thing. So it needs this. I have to run, install the, okay, so let me pause and figure out why this doesn't work. It's not pausing. Apparently I gotta pause it somewhere else, pause. Okay, so apparently, it's a no-brainer. Apparently when you run your install, you got to quote out your Apache Beam GCP, otherwise your shell tries to interpret this as probably like an index on an array. So did that, I got that installed. Now I go back to what I was trying to do earlier, which is Python. And if this works, I'll be surprised. We'll see. Beam, examples, word count. Okay, I'm going to input GS J Tucker data flow input text output GS J Tucker data flow counts. Okay, then I'm going to keep on going. Runner data. This is where it's telling it basically use Dataflow for the runner instead of local, right? Then project. Oh Lord, gotta know my project ID. Oh, I think I have it over here. Parameters. Paste the project ID in. Region. I want to run it in US Central 1. Okay. Temp location. Okay. GS bucket is J Tucker data flow /TMP. They're trailing slash on it, so I'll do the same thing. Okay, let's see if this works. I'm going to pause the video because this may take a minute because it's got to basically go to the back end, spin up the, right? And then it has to execute. So we'll see how long it takes and you'll get a sense of how much it costs us to do too. So I'm going to pause. So while this is working, you can actually see the progress of your job. You can see if you log under Dataflow, you can now see this job is running, right? And right, so then we'll see how long this thing takes in the end. So let me pause the video. I'll leave it here. I guess I could pause the video here. Okay, so it took a few minutes and it finished. Let's see how long it took in the end. It took 7 minutes. So I think this is, if I look at the detail of this thing, does it tell you how much CPU did it take? So critical path. I'm guessing the actual job took 3 minutes to run in terms of like how much you were billed. It's not clear how to read this actually. Oh, either way, took a fair amount of time to run, and then of course you were billed for the entire time. So I don't know, it was probably only a couple cents for this one, but anyway, Okay, so I think that's all we were going to cover with Apache, not Apache, well, Apache Beam, but really more importantly, Dataflow, right? So the guts of it is we ran basically the job, we executed it locally, which then triggered Dataflow to actually execute the job. And oh, the data should be also my buckets. That would be interesting to see. So if everything worked the way expected, if I go to cloud storage, we go in the data flow, there's my counts, there's an input, right? There's a temp file. And can I view this file? There it is, quick grab fox. So it's all stored in the cloud. Okay, well, that's really all I really intend to do with this section. So that would be it.